talking some college football, getting a look at another school in the Big 12. I believe we're going to be talking some K-State here in a moment. They're in a similar position to the other remaining 7 schools in the Big 12, not really knowing what the future looks like beyond next year and technically the next 4 or 5 years, but I think we have them now. So
we do. John Kurtz, K-Man Radio, joins us now. And John, Kansas State in all this, we talked to Kevin Lockett a couple weeks ago, and and his just get his view on where Kansas State remains as a power player in a power conference. But for fans and people that you talk to, where's been the mindset in Manhattan since the Texas and Oklahoma news dropped?
Yeah, I think it's just been a lot of angst and unease. I mean, there's just nobody is very settled right now, and unfortunately, I think that's going to continue on into the future for a while. Because I think everybody understands the gravity of the whole situation, right? Very quickly, you realize how much the rug could be pulled out from under you, and everything that everybody holds dear around here could be in jeopardy. I mean, the university that right now I think is trying to figure out how exactly to deal with what is happening, the changing dynamics of colleges. K-State's been declining in enrollment slightly, but ever since 2014, they have a president who is, lame duck seems like such a harsh term, but he's retiring here at the end of the year. So they're in the process of finding a new university president. So there's just a lot of transition from a leadership standpoint going on there as well. You're looking around like, all right, well, what happens if we're trying to figure this out, adapt, and now we're going to lose some of the front door access to the school, which would be playing in a Power 5 football conference. And think about the economy of Manhattan that's already been hit pretty hard by not having full attendance last year, obviously with COVID. And I think everybody just started going to the worst case scenario in the worst place with all of that stuff. So it moved very quickly there from the anger initially with Texas and Oklahoma from what had happened. And now it's like, hey, do we have a place here? Do we have a seat at the table? And I'm sure folks in Waco can relate to some of this. I mean, let's just be honest. Like, K-State has been the third winningest program in the Big 12, tied for third over the last decade, but that doesn't really mean anything, unfortunately. I mean, college football is anything but a meritocracy. I mean, why are folks in, for instance, South Carolina fans right now, they're safe. They've got a seat at the table. They can chant SEC as loudly as they want to, and they have not been as good a football program as Baylor or K-State here in recent history. So, unfortunately, that's just not the way it works. And I think everybody could pretty quickly figure out, all right, well, there's rumors about Kansas to the Big Ten. There's rumors about Iowa State to the Big Ten. We've got rumors about West Virginia to the ACC, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech to the Pac-12. All right, let's do the math here. Where's that leaving K-State? And unfortunately, I'm not sure that there are a ton of options as far as that's concerned. And so K-State internally, if you talk to people inside the athletic department in the program, they're certainly preaching Big 12 solidarity pretty hard right now. I think outwardly doing so more than some other places across the league, just because they do feel like that's probably their best option. But I would still contend that most people believe, and I would believe, that the best case scenario, now this can still happen with Big 12 solidarity, but the best case scenario would be somehow linking up with the Pac-12, whether that is a chunk of 4 teams going out there, whether that is a merger between both leagues. I think that's the only way you can stay anywhere near that $37 million figure that's been the payout for the Big 12 here. So I still view that as the best case scenario, certainly better than just the Big 12 expanding and taking some AAC teams. But even then, I mean, Gene Taylor, K-State's athletic director, recently was telling me, hey, who's to say that Houston, a Cincinnati, like schools like that can't come in, get Power 5 resources, grow even bigger? Central Florida, for instance, could be a sleeping giant. And then the next time TV contracts come around, there'd be streaming players in the game. It could look totally different. And maybe you've only taken a hit for a couple years financially, as you're also, kind of supplementing that with Texas and Oklahoma buyout money. So a lot of scenarios, I think, being thrown out there. But like everybody else, the short answer really is there's just a lot of unease right now based on what the circumstances are. Yeah,
tell us about it. We got a lot of college football fans listening that they want to hear what's the next move, right? Hey, who's the next team to go where, and then how does that? And it's all just been kind of a guessing game really since the Texas-Oklahoma story. So going back to that, the few days prior, the two of us, we were at Big 12 Media Days. Everything was just cool and calm, no drama. Bob Bowlesby was confident. And then, days later, boom, Texas and Oklahoma, via the Brett Zorneman article, get exposed in their behind-the-scenes dealings to move the SEC. What was your initial reaction just when you saw that story and then, the subsequent fallout from that, all the way up to, Bob Bowlesby, obviously, putting on some big boy pants about a week ago and going right at ESPN. What have you just made from the start to the point where we are now?
Well, it's wild. It's funny you bring up Big 12 Media Days, because I look back on that very fondly now. I was also there, and it felt great because, like there was none of this going on. It was the first real event. It felt like to me where you're back like in person, seeing all the media folks. It just felt normal, right? There was finally a sense of normalcy coming out of COVID. And boy, what a utopia that was, because 6 days later, it just all blew up. And I will never forget. I mean, you have these moments in your career, and just if you're a fan that you'll remember forever. One of them for me is actually the day that the story broke, pulling into the station here. I think it came out at about 2:30 Central Time, and it was probably closer to 3 by about the time I was pulling in the parking lot. And I had a text from somebody in a group text that typically is not centered around sports. And I just see a tweet that had been sent to me about Texas and Oklahoma leaving. They were like, "Hey, Kurtz, what's up with this?" And I was like, whoa, hold up, what? And so, you throw out everything you had prepared for the show that day, and that obviously turned into our lives, for the next couple of weeks. But look, it's been crazy. I think, like everybody else, I mean, it's disappointing to see this happen from Oklahoma's standpoint, but what can you do but throw up your hands and say, like, look, there's all this talk of Texas and Oklahoma subsidizing the conference, right? And it's annoying, and you hear that, but there is some reality to it. But Oklahoma's been the team and the school that has competitively subsidized the league. I mean, because they're the ones actually making the college football playoff. They win the league 6 times, 14 of the 25 Big 12 championships that have been crowned since the league started in 1996. So it's like, hey, man, you guys have earned it. If this is what you really want to do and you think this is going to elevate you to the next step, there's an element of that to me of just throwing my hands up and be like, all right, look, like, you guys go do it. But Texas, I mean, so much unearned arrogance compared it to like Oklahoma and Texas leaving feels like you see a couple of guys on their yachts and you're walking past, like obviously jealous of both. You wish that you could be both of those guys, and you're not going to be particularly fond of either one, but at least Oklahoma's the guy that built his company from the ground up. Blood, sweat, and tears went into that thing, where Texas is just riding through on the millions of dollars they inherited from daddy. So that's where a lot of the anger comes in, and you start going that route with Texas. I've seen this idea that Texas feels like they need a more exciting sell for their home games. Nobody wants to show up to see K-State, Baylor, Iowa State roll into town and play those games. And you look and say, well, I mean, the league was more exciting when Texas A&M, Nebraska, Colorado, et cetera, were in town, and you guys ran them off and now decided this wasn't good enough. So, I've gone through all of those phases. And look, I cheered Bob Bowlesby as hard as anybody when he sent the cease and desist to ESPN and did what he did. Because how long have we been hearing about the Big 12 has no backbone? Bob Bowlesby has no backbone. They're just going to be reactive and sit back. I mean, that was finally a proactive move when you have nothing to lose. I mean, you might as well go guns a-blazing. Frankly, I found it kind of disappointing that he decided to put a public end, like a ceasefire on what was happening in the public between the two sides, because it's like, what do you have to lose at this point? I really don't think there is very much. Is ESPN going to be really interested in giving you a good TV contract anyway the next time you need to come to the table with them? And if you really have that damning evidence, I would rather just continue to see the barbs go back and forth, especially somebody who hosts a talk show and a YouTube channel and needs content, right? But anyway, I was happy with the way that he handled that. I'm glad that that's the route that they're going. And now I think the message that I've been just trying to convey to everybody around here is like, everybody does want answers. Everybody wants a theory. What's the breaking news? Who's going to go where? And Gene Taylor has been stressing it to me. I talked to Max Olson from The Athletic. I know you guys have talked to him recently. He's been stressing this. Like, it just feels like now things have died down a little bit, and there will be some time to calculate what the next move is going to be. And everybody's just going to kind of have to sit here and deal with the unfortunate reality of not having a certain future. And that probably hurts recruiting more than anything else, other than just people's feelings right now. But that's a whole different conversation.
Well, John, this is what's different this time was that this all happened in the dark of night, with Texas and Oklahoma. The last time the Big 12 fell apart, Nebraska and A&M, even though it was one year and then the other, were very verbal about their beefs. I mean, like, it wasn't like there was no surprise, like when they finally I guess it's kind of surprising, but eventually it was like, well, we've had enough, we're not going to take it anymore, and left. This one was 1 week ago, like everybody's happy and good, and you're dancing around at AT&T Stadium, and it's like, what now? Nobody said anything to us about anything else. And so I think that's why it's so different now, is because it happened so fast before, but there was a lot of lead time. This time, no lead time. Nobody has had any time to react.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And honestly, one of the most fascinating elements of this whole story is the fact that this was going on for 6+ months. That was one thing Max Olson really reiterated to me, and I know he's as sore stuffed as about anybody in the Big 12, and I think the belief is that this was probably even longer than the 6-month timeline that had been floated out there for Texas and Oklahoma to be working on this. And how, in 2021, do you keep a story that massive with implications and tentacles that reach so far under wraps without anybody finding out? Especially, how leaky is Texas? Everything leaks there. They have a lot of very good and talented reporters. That's certainly a part of it, with the Austin media market, but also, you just have a lot of people that like to talk there, right? A lot of people with money, a lot of donors, a lot of people that want to feel like they're very involved at Texas, and they get chatty. So I just, that part of it floors me that it stayed under wraps for that long. And it sounds like Oklahoma State may have been the only place that had just a teeny tiny inkling and maybe a little bit of lead time on this and finding out before everybody else did. But you're exactly right about why this has been such a shock. Because look, if you would have told everybody, hey, at Big 12 Media Days, if you took a straw poll, like within the next 3 years, will Texas and Oklahoma leave the conference? You would probably get, I would imagine that'd be pretty split, if not the majority of the people saying, yeah, I mean, that's a very real possibility. But nobody expected it to happen right now. I think you just expected that it would have been a year or two on down the road. And so that's been a part of, I don't know if it's like the stages of grief or whatever that everybody's going through, but that certainly impacted it and sped up that timeline because it was all so sudden. I think the only real thing that has to happen here, right, and the perfect way to encapsulate all of this, the way we will find out about how this started, when it started, what the first moment was, and what the timeline was, is we will get a 30 for 30 because, of course, it has to be ESPN to divulge all the details on this story, right?
Well, I mean, they've got all the main sources. So, yeah, they got to be the ones to put that together. But, yeah, that will be no doubt a 30 for 30 or an HBO doc or something here in the next few years, no doubt about it. John, there are some political tie-ins that schools have. Like a few years back when the Big 12 was going through this, obviously Baylor was a part of, getting involved in the Texas politics to keep their spot. Oklahoma State, obviously, in that relationship with Oklahoma has come into play at times. Is there anything existing as far as the government there in Kansas and the schools and the way they're governed that would have K-State, going along with a Kansas, or is it just every man for himself? And if so, where do you think K-State fits in this? I think every school fan base has an idea of where they would like to see their school go to, but does K-State have a place where they would feel, like they would fit in if there is a change that has to be made?
Yeah, to answer the first part of that, I think the only real tangible thing that exists on that front is there is supposed to be a heads up given to the Board of Regents if a school is to negotiate with another conference.
Okay.
And so I know that's been brought up with the Kansas to the Big Ten rumors, which I think are very, very flimsy at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But that if that were going to be official, that they would have to give some kind of formal notice to the Board of Regents. Don't believe that there's anything really tying the two schools together. I think obviously they'd like to keep both of them together if they can, but in the end, when it comes down to it, if you're the Kansas Board of Regents and you're looking at it and saying, all right, well, K-State may get left behind, but Kansas could go to a major conference, what's better for the state, having one Power 5 school or zero? Right. I mean, the answer is going to be one. I think that's the unfortunate reality. And Kansas definitely does have more in the way of options, at least in the way that I view it, based on, what you hear around here. But I don't think the crazy part about the climate here is that I think a lot of Kansas fans and the general tone around there, and it's been set by some of the media, is that they feel like look, they'll be fine. It's a shoo-in. If they want to be in the Big Ten, eventually they're going to be in the Big Ten. In the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. I don't think it's that. I think there's a non-zero chance that they can be in the Big Ten, but I don't think basketball really matters that much. Stuart Mandel made a great point with the numbers where he boiled it down to, hey, like Big 12 basketball basically is worth $25 million worth. And even if you're going to give Kansas all of that, then that's still have to pay out for a Big Ten team. So you add them to the Big Ten. Now all of a sudden you're splitting the pot an extra way and people are making less money. So I think that's just a harsh reality for Kansas, even though they have that AAU status. And also Kansas 10 years ago had a program that was coming right off of the Mark Mangino era where they went to the Orange Bowl over a 5-year period. They averaged 8 wins per season. Now they've gone through a decade of maybe the worst FBS football we've ever seen played. So that's an anchor really dragging them down. So I think it'll be very interesting how that plays out. As far as K-State goes, I think there would be an outside chance that they could be included in a 14 package in the Pac-12. If it's going to be something like Tech, Oklahoma State, K-State, and then I don't know if it comes down to TCU, Baylor, how all that works out. I know the obvious hurdles there that people talk about with the Pac-12 and TCU and Baylor. being small religious institutions. But I still think it's a long shot that would ever happen for K-State to be included in a group like that. I think your best hope has to be some kind of full-time merger eventually on down the road between the Big 12 and the Pac-12. Maybe it's, hey, for the next 3 or 4 years, it's a scheduling alliance. You really bleed Oklahoma and Texas dry, get all the money that you can out of them, and then hope at the end of that the Pac-12 is willing to do something more significant. I think that could be an option. But as I said, K-State's really preaching Big 12 solidarity because I think they feel like that is going to be the most realistic option, that everybody does stay together. You get all the money you can from Oklahoma and Texas. Hope that it winds up with some kind of joint deal with the Pac-12 and the landscape changing there. But if not, you go add a couple of teams and see if you can grow them up, and then the streaming dynamics change things and you can earn more money down the road. So not the greatest of options, but really that's kind of the same boat that we're all in, unfortunately, right now.
John, on the field, before we let you go, how confident are you in the Wildcats to maybe surprise some people in the Big 12 this year, especially given that Skylar Howard's back, the young quarterback got to play quite a bit last year. So at that position, which derailed them last year when Skylar Howard went down, they should be set to go, and they've got playmakers like Deuce Vaughn in the field as well.
Yeah, I think the feel around here, there's a lot of optimism, and in particular about the offense. To me, it's almost the opposite of what you would have expected when Chris Kleiman were hired. You would have told me, like, hey, in year 3, would you expect more optimism around the offense or the defense? I would think, well, Kleiman's a defensive guy. North Dakota State, kind of a smash mouth brand of football. You don't think of a really exciting offense. I'd be like, yeah, defense, of course. But it really is flip-flop based on where their personnel's at. Skylar Thompson being back makes a huge, huge difference. That guy's a sixth-year senior. He's been around forever. All this talk about him spending the last year with his injury, he would sit up with the coaches up in the box and was trying to learn the game from that perspective. So they just rave about command of the offense, how he's looking. He's healed up. I think he's totally good to go. And actually, they feel great about Will Howard too, who was the kid who got thrown in as a true freshman, no spring ball. I literally saw him last spring working out at Manhattan High School, the same place I was trying to get a workout in. That's how much he got thrown into the fire last season, but he's had a great offseason, and they may find a role for him even with Skylar playing as a starting quarterback. Deuce Vaughn is a coach's dream. He could not have a more coachable guy and a better leader in addition to all the talent that he has, so he will be a star. They have a lot of pieces on offense, an experienced offensive line that's very deep. Malik Knowles is an all Big 12 talent at receiver if he can ever stay healthy. Daniel Amaterbebe, whose brother just got taken to the NFL draft. He's a transfer that K-State picked up at tight end that I think will have a big year. So the offense should be good. Defensively, they lost Wyatt Hubert to the NFL draft. He was their biggest playmaker. I'm not sure they have anybody with that kind of upper-end talent on the defense right now, and the linebackers in particular are a massive question mark. Should be pretty good in the secondary. Julius Brents is a transfer corner they got from Iowa, who I think is going to be an NFL player and will be a stud. That will be the strength of the defense. The front seven, there are a lot of questions there. And you look at the schedule, man, it's tricky. They open the season with Stanford and Arlington. And then after that, they have to play Nevada. And I think there's a legitimate debate about which game will actually be tougher out of those two teams. Nevada's been pretty salty. And then they start Big 12 play with Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State as the first 3 games. So it's a front-loaded schedule. If things don't come together early, that could really derail the way that the season goes. But to me, the expectation would be 7 to 8 wins right now for this team. That's kind of the feeling I have. And honestly, if they can get back to an 8-win season, which is where they were at under Chris Kleiman 2 years ago, and it's only non-COVID season, I think that would be great and a really good sign to where things are going.
John Kurtz, K-Man Radio in Manhattan that covers Kansas State. And John, we certainly appreciate it. Have fun on your show today. Thanks for hopping on.
Absolutely. Anytime, guys. Thanks.
All right, that's John Kurtz. That segment will be up in the podcast here shortly if you missed any of it. When we come back, we wrap a clock.